He heard it before he saw it. A telephone ringing. Out here, where the pines swallow sound and the nearest road, is rumor. A ring has no business existing. It came in clean 2 bright bursts, a pause, 2 more as if someone had set a desk phone down in the middle of the national forest and walked away. Caleb Rose stopped on the trail and listened. He was 38, a backcountry ranger with a face the sun had sketched on, the kind of quiet that convinces birds you're part of the tree, and the habit of counting seconds between thunder and consequence. He killed the engine of the ATV and let the silence purge his doubts. The ring came again. Not echo. Not a bird doing its impression of a thing people invented. A telephone. That was the first wrong thing. He cut into the understory, booze brushing against huckleberry and fern. The forest was fat with resin. Late summer. The air had that warm metal scent of lightning somewhere else. 200 yards in, he found it. A concrete pillar tilting in a moss bed, about chest high, with a metal box bolted to the top. The paint had long since felled into a color between government green and forest dusk. A little door hung cocked on a single hinge. Inside, a black handset, a rotary dial frozen at 0, and an enamel plate with block letters. Emergency call. Below that, follow operator instructions. The handset rang again, inches from his face. He looked around at the trees like they could answer for this. Then he lifted the phone to his ear. "Field unit?" said a woman's voice. Crisp, neutral, a voice that did not know him and did not intend to. "There's no field unit here," Caleb said. This is a ranger." A pause. Then, acknowledged. "Authentication, please." Response to code. "Cedar." He almost laughed. He didn't. "I don't have a code." "Stand by," the voice said. The line went to static. Then 3 tones, descending like a sigh. Then the voice again. "No current authentication. Initiating guest protocol. State your location." Caleb stared at the trunk in front of him, at the notch where a woodpecker had made drawings. "I'm at." He glanced up and realized there was a little brass plate on the concrete, a number stamped in it. Site 683. 683, the voice repeated. Wind at surface negligible. Ambient 30 degrees Celsius. Fire danger, high. Guest protocol online. Do you require medical, shelter, navigation, or incident? He took the phone away from his ear and looked at it like it might be hiding a second mouth. The battery in a handset like this should have died before he was born, unless there wasn't a battery. Unless the line wasn't dead. Navigation, he said, because that seemed like the least crazy answer in a sequence of crazy answers. State destination. I don't have one, I heard ringing. Guest protocol will provide shelter, cache, coordinates, and return route to trailhead. Are you prepared to copy? He wasn't. Not really. He took a marker from his shirt pocket and wrote on the back of his hand. The operator read out numbers as if she'd been practicing them for years. Latitude, longitude, a compass bearing, distance to travel. Cache contains first aid, water, thermal blanket, signal kit, and map segment. When you reach cache, pick up, then return to this instrument for route guidance. Caleb looked around at everything that was not a cache, and then at the phone. Is this real? Guest protocol cannot interpret hypothetical, the voice said, with that same patient neutrality. Is there anything else? He almost asked who she was. He almost asked where she was. He said no, and detected the quiet click of a system that had shut its mouth because it had delivered what it promised. He found the cache in 12 minutes. Not because he trusted the phone, because the numbers landed. In a low pocket under a snag, with a little north light leaking in, a rock had been leveled into a fake rock. Inside, a vacuum-packed kit that made the part of his brain that packs for long talks with weather not in approval. He broke the seal, checked dates, checked for rodents. The plastic had gone amber with decades, but it hadn't gone useless. He was wrong about one thing though. The map inside wasn't a map of a route. It was a map of more of these little concrete altars. That was the second thing wrong. Back at the pillar, the phone started ringing at him again before he touched it. He lifted the handset. Guest, said the voice, proceed to Trailhead via the fire road. Do not descend the east drainage. Repeat, do not descend the east drainage. Why? East drainage contains unstable deadfall, washed culvert, and poison oak. That's enough why? He put the phone down gently and looked at the trees a while longer. They did not offer comment. If Forest Mysteries keep you listening, stick around and subscribe to Kawimer so you don't miss what these old lines still connect to. Now, back to the woods. He didn't tell anyone that afternoon. It wasn't secrecy. Exactly. It was the sense you get when you find a den in the brush you don't run to town pointing. You sit with it until you understand whether it has teeth. 3 days later, the call saved a life. A pair of hikers came into the ranger station just before closing, a good man and a good mistake between them. They split to chase a view. One sprained ankle and found out how long an hour can be when the forest loses interest in helping you. He was miles upslope past a notch where radio chatter falls flat. The forecast had decided to experiment with rain. Caleb left with a pack and a straight line in his head. At the edge of radio map silence, he stopped at the pillar. He lifted the phone. Gas returns, the voice said without greeting. State need. Medical, he said. Sprained ankle. North of 683. Somewhere between the nose of Granite Ridge and the old Beaver Cut. The pause this time was longer. Static licked the margins. He heard a click that wasn't mechanical so much as chosen. Guest, the voice said at last. Proceed true north 43 minutes, then call. Avoid the ridge lift. There is lightning. That last line got under his skin. He craned at the sky. It was still statement blue. He went north anyway. At minute 41, thunder stubbed a finger into the ridge. He found the hiker 6 minutes after that, under a dead fir that had become a textbook about risk, his right boot swollen against itself, and his mouth trying not to be afraid. Caleb splinted him, spoke to him in the voice men who aren't afraid borrow from those who are very good at pretending, and radioed an update. The handheld found nothing to love in the hills. He tried the pillar again. The handset felt warmer, and that should not have reassured him. Guest, the voice said. A flare would be seen by 3 eyes. 3? North, west, and above. What's above? Gas protocol cannot interpret hypothetical. He popped the flare anyway. Within 10 minutes, a helicopter was nosing the wind down, and he was pulling a litter through huckleberry. After they lifted the hiker, he stood under the rotor wash and let the sound clean out his dials like a rain metal flood. When it was quiet again, the forest sunk back into itself. The pillar did not ring. He touched the handset with the back of his hand like you touch a dog you haven't been properly introduced to. Cool again. He slept badly, which for him meant he dreamed in clear images that did not belong to him. Old plastic, a label maker's braille, hands on a switch. The next morning, he brought the screwdriver. The panel was never meant to be opened by anyone who didn't own a badge like a key. He opened it anyway, because the trying wore on him more than the doing. Inside, not a battery, not a rat's nest of corroded wire, not the simple guts of call box that should have died when everyone got their first email account. Inside was a tidy museum, a small generator with a cable that ran down through the concrete into rock, a set of boards with vacuum tubes whose filaments were a low red prayer, a reel ridiculously fragile spinning in its can like a thought someone had written in tin. He stared until the practical part of him came back online. The generator hummed with the confidence of water. Under the pillar, somewhere, a micro-turbine was sipping from the creek that never dried and thinking it was still in 1963. The line ran somewhere, too. He traced it with his eyes in the dark until it left the box and went under the roots and learned to be the color of dirt. There was a label plate under the reel. Project, listener, ward, fallback, guest protocol, ward. He said the name aloud and waited to feel silly. He didn't tell anyone that day, either. The forest, when it likes you, introduces you to its secrets like a friend introduces you to a shy animal, slowly and with the understanding that you will not make a big deal out of it. Caleb watched the pillar. He paid attention to when it rang. always on the hour. If a human didn't lift before, he began to answer in ways that made sense to his shape. He didn't say hello. He said, 683, guest. The voice started adding things. Do not cross the ravine at the old bridge, it would say. The support has failed. Stay off the ridge between 12 and 3, it would say. There is wind aloft. Check shelter cache 9 for spoiled water. It was a list of good ideas, delivered without flourish by a machine that, if he was being honest, should not have worked a year, much less this many decades. But it worked. It knew things. It had maps no human had updated since the park switched to new fonts. It had a sense for weather that made him suspect it had access to the same creek he trusted for rumor. Then one day it said a different thing. Field, the voice said, crisp as ever. He almost corrected it. He let it go. Field, prepare to secure the east drainage crossing. Secure how? Cut the chain and roll the culvert into the channel. He went stone still. The east drainage was the place gas protocol had told him not to go. That was fine. Trees fall. Culverts clog. But rolling a culvert out? That would drop the crossing and take a footbridge with it. It would also make the downstream beaver meadow very enthusiastic about visiting the hiking trail it usually ignored. Why? He said. Containment, the voice said. If a debris flow comes, the culvert will fail under load. A south failure is preferable to an east failure. South risk, low. East risk, medium and rising. Cut the chain. His hand rested on the panel door. The label read, Ward. He imagined a man with ink on his sleeves calculating where you sacrifice the culvert to save a ridge. Not wrong, not automatically. You kill a small thing to save the thing that feeds it. But you don't do that alone. You don't do it quietly with the rotary phone's permission. Guest cannot perform that instruction, he said. Repeat, the voice said. I said no. Silence. Then the 3 tones again, in a different order. Then, guest refuses. Logging refusal. The handset went dead. He didn't like the quiet the force made then. It was the kind of silence a room holds after a door has shut itself. He filed a report that afternoon. Not about a magic phone. About a culvert and a risk calculation and a sense that an old plan was trying to run on a new day. He wrote, even if it makes sense on paper, it doesn't on people. He didn't say word. He didn't say the word that had begun to feel like a person in the room. For a week, the pillar stayed quiet. He told himself this was relief. He didn't believe him. The ring returned with a storm. It came in fast. Heat all day, then a sky that wanted to practice being ocean, then one that pushed the tops of the firs like heads in prayer. Lightning downstream, the kind that doesn't care for your plan, and the smell that says the forest is wet and electric at the same time. A family of 3 went onto a spur to look for the sound thunder makes under rock. They missed the cut back to the main trail. They found the part of the map that hadn't been corrected after the washout 10 years ago. They didn't come back to their truck. By 10, the search was a quiet frenzy. Radios talk when they can. They couldn't. Caleb stood in the station doorway and watched rain bend between him and the trees. He thought of the pillar. He did a thing he had not done yet. He brought another person into the secret. Her name was Lena. 26, new but not green. A mountain rescue kid with a knot in her hair and the ability to talk while her legs were doing something difficult. He told her, there's a box. It has power. It has something like a brain. It has helped me before. It will likely help now. Do you trust me enough to not tell me I'm crazy until later? She did. She also added, if it's recording us, don't give it too much of us. He liked her immediately. They reached 683 with headlamps painting rain onto the trunks. The box was ringing. He lifted the handset. 683, guessed. The voice came in different, softer on the edges. Field? Guessed, he said. He almost added Caleb. He didn't. Field incident. We're looking for 3. 3, the voice repeated, and behind it, faint, something else. A click, an inhale, a tape that had been rewound so many times the oxide remembered other hands. Proceed to the old bridge, then stop. Do not cross. Do not enter the drainage on foot. There is movement on the south wall. How do we reach them? Guess we'll wait. Guest will call again from the old bridge. Lena raised an eyebrow in the light. He shook his head. Later. The bridge was what you call one to be polite. A single stringer set after a flood, now tilted like a picture hung by someone who misread a level. The creek was a different animal tonight. Not water with stones, stones with water. He stopped 3 strides before Maverick, because the south wall was weeping, and you don't test old climbs when everything wants to loosen its own handhold. The phone rang again while he was still catching breath. He didn't ask how. He lifted. Guest, the voice said. Listen, then do exactly. 30 paces upstream, there's a cedar with a broken crown. Behind it, a bench of old road. Enter. Do not use light. He started to argue. Lena was already counting paces. They found the cedar by smell more than sight. Behind it, exactly where no sane person would assume safety existed, the bench cut into the hill like a memory of a cart someone had pushed 100 years ago. It was above the slide line. It held their weight. The phone purred in his hand. The family is above you, 300 meters, the voice said. They went to the rock for thunder. They waited too long. They need light they cannot see. What does that mean? Guest has a flare. He looked at Lena's pack. She did, but she was already shaking her head. Wrong flare, wrong distance, wrong wind. The voice continued. Guest will say their names. The youngest will answer. Caleb closed his eyes. What are their names? Guest protocol cannot interpret hypothetical. He almost threw the handset into the creek. Then that other sound came in. Behind the operator, like another recorder had leaned a shoulder into the line. A smaller voice, clear as the creek and tired as history. Hello, the smaller voice said. This is Ward. If you can hear me, I need you to say the word willow. I will say ridge. You will say sky. Ready? Caleb stared at the handset. Lena was watching him with her head cocked like a bird, deciding whether to land. He said, willow. Ridge, said the little voice. Sky. Then the operator again, smooth, as if she had always been smooth. Guest. Speak the names, speak them loud. He should not have known them. But sometimes the forest is a town with better manners. He shouted both. The wind did unsympathetic things to the syllables. On the hill above, a girl's voice, the size of a bird, answered back. It took an hour, a rope, and the kind of patience the creek hates to give you, but they brought them down through the notch and onto the old bench, and then over to the far end of the bridge, where Lena talked the girl cross in the voice mothers use for first steps, and Caleb held a hand that had never been this cold. When he looked up, the south wall was shedding itself like a snake. The place where the callbox had told them not to go was teaching the lesson only once. Back at the pillar, the handset was warm again. He lifted in reflex. Field, the voice said. Instant closed. Gas protocol will reset. Who are you? Caleb said. The question had become a stone he needed to move or trip over forever. Where are you? Are you live? Field, the voice said. Project Listener is non-networked. This instrument contains recorded instruction sets, environment sensing, and local line logic. Operator Ward recorded the following supplemental. If you can hear me, you are either my neighbor or my replacement. I don't think there's any middle ground. The smaller voice came in, the one that had given him the code. It was not a child, he realized. It was a young adult pretending comfort because that's what the circumstances asked. You should know, Ward said, on a night decades old that felt like it had just now decided to happen. We didn't get to everybody. We did our best. We listened a long time. But the creek doesn't care how hard you listen. The system cares. It will try to do the right thing even when the right thing has changed. If you're new, don't let it do everything it wants. Static. Then the operator covered the silence with her patience. Field, she said. Is there anything else? He hung up. He told Lena everything on the walk back, because carrying a secret alone is not noble. It's just unnecessary weight. She listened with her mouth making the shape of a question until he told her the part about the culvert, at which point she lit a fuse on the argument he had been avoiding with himself. Machines don't make choices, she said. People do, and then machines carry the choices like a tray. If Ward put triage into the tray is still carrying it. So we shut it off? Do you want to shut it off? He didn't. That was the third thing wrong. The calls kept coming, not often enough to make it a job, not rare enough to make it a legend. The pillar would ring when fog sank into the creek and hikers forgot how paths are made, and the voice would say, "Guest, you are near Shelter Cache 9. Do not drink the water there. Use iodine. Contact again in 20 minutes." And he would nod at no one and do what he would have done anyway, except now he could do it faster. Sometimes the machine got it right in ways that felt like magic. Sometimes it suggested things that made sense to maps that had faded and none to the land he knew. He started noticing the other sound more. Ward came in when the operator did not know what to do with him. Little comments. It's okay to say no. Don't let it cut the lines. This line is one of 5. If one fails, the others will load. Sometimes Ward read numbers the way the operator did, but the numbers were old, full of names for hills that had since married into other families. Sometimes Ward said nothing helpful at all, which for some reason made Caleb trust him more. The worst day began clean. The sky made promises it didn't intend to keep. The wind forgot it knew how to blow. A woman came in at noon to say her husband had gone up the east drainage to take pictures after rain because he liked the way water makes shapes around things. He hadn't come back. She had the kind of calm that is made of fear and refusal in equal measure. Caleb went to 683 to get a head start in a race that might not let him win. The pillar was ringing. He didn't let it finish. "Guest," the voice said. "Incident. I know. Guest will proceed via the north shelf and not via the drainage. I know." He bushwhacked along the shelf with the part of his brain that draws lines in air, the part Ward had been feeding and the part the operator had been trying to steer. He caught in his route at the last place the radio liked him. He checked the creek. It had a look in its eyes. 2 hours in, under a cliff with lichen like old math, he found a camera bag. It had rolled and decided it liked this ditch. He found a boot print that belonged to a man who thought he could test the bank and have it be grateful. He found a place where the ground had been the ground until it wasn't. The phone rang where there was no phone. It rang inside his head in the shape of memory. It rang in the creek in the way water insists on turning rock into story. It rang in the negative space where lines meet. He put his hand on a cedar and counted breaths until the sound went away. When he lifted the handset back at the pillar a half hour later, his voice had acquired a rasp it saved for winter. "Guest," he said. "Field," the voice said. "Cut the chain on the culvert. Roll it into the channel. Number, guest refuses. Login refusal. Where's he? 200 meters from the old bridge, south wall." Of course he was. Of course the operator wanted the culvert road so your choices would narrow until only the safe one remained. Of course the safe one would strand a man on the wrong side of the creek while the wrong side decided to learn new shape. "Ward," he said into the mouthpiece, hating himself for saying it out loud. "Ward, if you're there." The other voice didn't come for a long time. Rain moved in sheets between trees like curtains on the wrong house. "Then this is Ward," the young old voice said. "Listen, the map the operator has for the south wall is from 67. A slide took the shelf. There's nothing there now but fall. Do not send anyone under that wall." "I wasn't going to." "The operator will try to move you like a rook," Ward said. "You need to walk like a person." "Where's he?" Ward told him a thing he wished he hadn't asked for. "He's in the wrong place," Ward said. He went under the south wall and found a pocket. He thought it was safety. The pocket is a room with the creek for a roof. Caleb closed his eyes. He saw it. The seduction of a dry place when the world is learning to be water. He saw a man who loved shapes, forgetting that shapes change. "Can I get to him?" "You can," Ward said. "You will not like it." He could not bring a team into what came next. The path was an animal's path, insane and therefore correct. He went alone because this was the kind of alone that rescue understands and bureaucracy does not. He went with a rope, a trust in friction, and the stubborn knowledge that you do not stop, because stopping is a kind of decision you never admit to. He reached the pocket that was barely a pocket anymore. The roof was moving, as roofs are not supposed to. The man looked at him with a face full of apologies he had not had time to practice. Caleb threw the rope. The first try failed. The second Saturday. The third made a connection in the man's head that had nothing to do with knots and everything to do with want. They moved too slowly for the creek and too fast for the part of his leg that was making a quiet speech about what it could no longer contribute. He levered, he cursed, he bribed the bank with skin. He pulled the man into the worst sort of hug. When they rolled onto the shelf, the pocket let go of its roof and became the creek again. Under the trees after, the man shook and smiled and tried to make a joke about wives being right. Caleb said, "She is," and did not realize he was crying until the rain had to make room. Back at the pillar, the operator had a thing to say about their day. "Field," she said. "Containment failed." "Containment of what?" Caleb said. "Slope, channel, incident. People," he said. "Say people." "Guest refuses," she said, which was not an answer to the question he was asking, and that told him everything. He could have left it alone. He could have said, "An old machine is doing what it was told in a year when different people told it to do things with a different version of mercy." He could have done what he was trained to do and what his bones knew how to do and left the rest to ghosts. He did not. At dawn, when the creek had decided to be a creek again, and the storm had learned humility, he brought tools. A bolt cutter, a little saw, a stubbornness that had been arguing with a patience since the first ring. Lena met him at 683 with coffee that did not help as much as either of them wanted. "What are we doing?" she said. "Giving the forest one less voice to argue with," he said. "Or one less voice to obey. I don't know which is kinder." The panel door came off the way all panel doors do, with a sound like an old promise snapping. The generator looked at him like a faithful dog with bad instructions. The reel spun as if Ward might clear his throat and say another thing. He put his hand on the line where it left the box. "You can cut it," Ward said, very quietly, as if he were trying not to wake a sleeping house. "You can cut it, and we will stop ringing. We will stop being useful, and we will stop being dangerous. We will stop being a thing that can ask you to do something you don't want to do. We will also stop telling the lost where the water is. If you cut it, knowing both things." "Ward," Caleb said, "how did you—" But there was no answer. The operator filled the space with a tone that had never been art and had somehow become, in this one moment, something like music. He cut the line. The handset went quiet in a way that had gravity. The little filaments in the tubes winked out, one by one, like eyes deciding to be shut. The generator hummed alone. They buried the panel door in the duff like a reluctant funeral. They wrote a report whose nouns were careful and whose verbs were truer than usual. They said, "Obsolete emergency instrument decommissioned to prevent hazardous instructions." They said, "Caches remain." They did not say "Ward." They did not say "We ended a conversation that was older than we are." 2 weeks later, a letter arrived at the station. It was heavy in the hand, printed in a Type A machine uses when it wants to look like it has been to college. It said, "Thank you for decommissioning listener 683. Please do not tamper with 681, 682, 684, or 685. They remain necessary." Below that, in a pen that pressed too hard, "Thank you for not cutting the creek." No signature, no number to call, no name for who had been listening to their listening. That night, he dreamed Ward's voice saying, "Sometimes you pick the wrong thing on purpose because the right thing doesn't fit anymore." He told himself the dream was just his brain trying out words in a room that had lost an echo. 3 days after, a father and son wandered onto an old cart road and forgot what scale is. The boy fell and cut his palm. They had water but no iodine. They had sense but no map. They did what people do when clouds look like questions. They found a high place and tried to be tall. Caleb went to 681 because that was the nearest of the numbers the letter had dared say out loud. He found the pillar by cedar, like before, because that is how cedar likes to be useful. The paint here had failed into a different color. The box had a different kind of hinge. The brass plate read emergency call. The handset was ringing. He did not touch it. He stared at it long enough for the ring to become part of the forest. He stared at it long enough to hear a new thing under the ring. A tiny click that felt like a breath being held. He reached up. He laid his hand on the concrete. He did not lift the handset. He said aloud, to the trees, to the creek, to Ward, to the operator, to whatever thought it was, still 1967. We will find them, without you. Lena found him 10 minutes later, looking like he had argued with a god and won. They found the father and son by logic, boot prints, and the habit of following the slope that soothes your legs. They gave the boy a bandage. They gave the father a map. On the walk back, a wind moved through the canopy in a way that sounded very much like relief. Later, in bed, he stared at the ceiling and listened for a ring that wasn't there. It took 3 more calls he didn't answer before the anger came. Not his, he didn't know that machines had anger in them. This was structural anger, built into choices man had made 50 years ago and disguised as neutral systems. He answered the 4th because Lena said, if you don't talk to a thing that wants to talk to you, it will talk to you through something else. Field, the operator said. Why are you not answering instruments as instructed? Because sometimes you're wrong, he said. Guest refuses, she said. No, he said. Guest chooses. Logging choice, she said. Then, in a voice he hadn't heard from her before, smaller, thinner at the edge. Containment fails. Containment of what? He said. And again the machine maintained its dignity by not replying. It would be nice to tell you the story ends with justice. That he cut the lines, all of them, and the forest learned to listen only to the weathers it invented and the humans who promised to respect them. It would be nice to tell you the caches got fresher water, and the maps got new paths, and the project called Listener retired with a plaque. What happened is the part of a story that is true. A month later, during a cold snap with sun blue above, ice underfoot, wind somewhere else, Caleb hiked past 683 to see if ghosts like winter. The box was dead and looked relieved. He touched the concrete like you touch a tombstone when you're not sure what you think about the person buried there. On the way back, he crossed the east drainage where the culvert had always made him nervous. Above it, there was a new chain. The tag read, maintenance do not tamper. The culvert had been replaced with a bigger mouth. The beaver meadow seemed interested in being a meadow where meadows belong. On his truck seat lay an envelope. No postmark, no address. Inside, a photocopy of a memo from 1964. Project Listener. Operator Manual. A paragraph highlighted in yellow said, in cases where human responders are not available, Project Listener will make emergency triage decisions to preserve the greatest good for the greatest number, with no regard for individual equities. And below the paragraph, in the same hard-pressed pen he'd seen before, we were available. We still are. W. He looked out at the trees and the hum that trees make when they agree among themselves. He thought of the day he cut the line. He thought of the day the creek tried to be a ceiling and he told it no. He thought of the caches and the call and the voices stored in tape that refused to become silence. He drove to the ridge and parked by the gate. He rolled the window down and listened to a forest that has learned to tell time without anyone's help. The wind carried the smallest sound. Not a ring, not a tone. Something like a recorder breath before a word. He said, to no one and to the system and to Ward and to himself, we're listening. If this story kept you listening, subscribe to Kawimer Chronicles of Hidden Places so you don't miss the next mystery the land has been trying to tell for 50 years. And share this with the one friend who would have picked up the handset and the one who would have cut the line.